Ezra was born in April of 2015. He was a healthy baby boy. He was absolutely beautiful. Like all grandmas, I fell instantly in love with him. I'm not sure if any of you are grandparents or have grandchildren or parents. You know that the love runs deep. On that day, it was a Sunday. It started out like a normal day for us. My daughter, my youngest daughter, my husband and I were at home in our pajamas. I was doing a crochet project when I got a phone call from my oldest daughter begging me to come to the emergency room. I went to the emergency room to find my grandson, who was 2 years old at the time. He was on a gurney, and they were putting a breathing tube into his throat. He was lifeless. The doctor was barking orders, and the staff was acting quickly. Their faces looked hopeless, and I was scared. They had to get him stabilized in order to get him to Dornbecker, and they needed to do that immediately, which later we found out that they didn't think he was going to make it out of that room at that time. My daughter, Ezra's mom, went with him, and my husband, my younger daughter, and myself went in a car, and we drove. We didn't understand the severity of it at the time that we left, and we believed it was an accident when we drove over that mountain. When we got to about we could get service, my daughter called me crying and saying that they had to take him into emergency brain surgery or he was going to die, where they had to remove his bone flap because of the blood was pooling so severely on his brain. When we got to the Dornbecker, they were just putting him into his room, and he was in a crib, and he laid there lifeless, and he had tubes coming out of his brain, and he had IVs, and alarms were going off, and doctors had that same hopeless look on their face. And they told us that he would most likely not make it through the night. 14 hours after our nightmare began, a law officer took us out of Ezra's room and took us into a private room, Ezra's father, my daughter, and myself, and told us that my daughter's former boyfriend admitted to hurting Ezra. He confessed, and he confessed to playfully shaking Ezra and playfully hitting his head on the floor. And he then said that Ezra tried to get up and was acting like a drunk baby, falling down over his toys until he could no longer get up. He then put him to bed and waited to go pick up my daughter at work, where he carried him out of that bedroom lifeless, and he said he may or may not have hit his head when he took him out of the bedroom door. And he may or may not have hit his head when he took him out the front door, and then possibly hit his head when he put him in the car, unconscious and almost dead. He did survive that night, and they wanted to do an MRI on him, but he was too fragile to even be taken down to the room down the hallway. And so we waited a third day, and he did survive that day, and they did the MRI, and they told us that he was most likely going to live in a vegetative state the rest of his life. And they encouraged us to pull him off life support. At one point, the doctors took me aside, being the grandmother, I'm assuming, and more mature in life experience, and said Ezra would most likely not open his eyes, and we would eventually get tired of taking care of him, which would mean, we would eventually want him to be taken off life support. And to do that, they would have to starve him to death. And they asked me, would you like your grandson to die peacefully today or starve to death later? Every joy, every ounce of joy was taken from us on that day. There was nothing in life that could prepare me to answer that question, or even my children. I was supposed to cherish making cookies with him. I was going to watch his eyes dance with excitement when Santa was coming. I was going to see the awe of the fireworks from above us. I was going to see his face light up when he found an Easter egg during an Easter egg hunt. Everything was taken away. I don't get to see him play baseball. He's most likely not going to graduate. There's not a chance for weddings or family for him. We made a bold decision to keep Ezra alive, but his future is not bright. They say that he will most likely not make it to be a teenager.